I've been through over 1,000 photos from the Astronomy Photographer of the Year competition to see what gear is used by the best astrophotographers in the world. The competition is run by the Royal Museums in London. They've shared the data with me and I've been through to see what you can learn about gear and astrophotography. In this video I'm going to focus on landscape astrophotography. I've pulled together everything I can on cameras, lenses and star trackers. Sometimes the gear used is expensive and premium, but sometimes it's not. There are some surprising results in there. So first, let's get stuck in. We're going to look at cameras. So from the 1,000+ images, about half, well, about a bit over 400 are in this category of landscape astro. So that's the data I'm going to use in this video. Just to note, the actual categories of the Astronomy Photography of the Year competition are different. There's many. They've also changed a bit over the years. So this categorization of landscape versus deep sky and planetary is mine. If you do want to read more about the methodology I've used to make the study, it's in a PDF below, and that's also got all the data that you can take away if you want. So cameras for nightscapes. Basically everybody, 99.9% are using either a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. There's a small spattering of smartphones and tablets, but it's not enough to really dive into. If we dive straight into the most used models for the last 8 years, you can see them here. So the top, the Canon EOS 6D, followed by the Sony A7 III, and then the Nikon D850. So the Canon EOS 6D is a pretty legendary old DSLR, legendary in the astrophotography world. It's pretty old. It was released in 2012. Obviously this data I'm showing you now is for 8 years, so things do change over that time, and I'll show you some more recent data in a minute. But people are still using the Canon EOS 6D and being shortlisted in this competition in 2025, so it's still delivering. The Sony A7 III, it's mirrorless, not DSLR. It kind of hits a lot of the sweet spots that you want in astrophotography, nightscape photography, but without being overly expensive. 8 years is quite a long time to be looking at data. Trends change, new cameras come out, some disappear. So here's a smaller set of data. So this is the last 3 years, 2023 to 2025. You can see the top cameras here. The Sony A7R5 is top. That's quite a premium mirrorless camera. Then you got the Sony A7 III second again, and the Canon EOS 6D round out the top three. You can see there's more mirrorless cameras in there. So only the 6D and the Nikon D850 are DSLRs, the rest are all mirrorless. So aside from the specific models, we can look now, what are the key traits of these cameras? Are there common traits that make them particularly good for what we're doing? So DSLR versus mirrorless, is there a difference? Is there a reason why you would pick one over the other? This chart, it has the split between DSLR versus mirrorless over that period of 8 years. So you look here at 2018, over 80% were using DSLRs, only a few using mirrorless, but that's sort of changed over the course of each year steadily. And then in 2022, you can kind of see a cross point where mirrorless took over from DSLRs and continuing upwards. That's not just an astrophotography thing, that's a general trend in the photography and camera market. There are a few benefits to using mirrorless cameras. They're lighter, for one. They have the live view screen, which is really good for helping compose your images and understand what the photo will look like before you take it, and also for focusing on sharp stars. So there are a few benefits, but inherently they won't necessarily take better photos than a DSLR. It'll just make your life a little bit easier. So now looking at what brands of cameras, what manufacturers people are using, 99.9% use Sony, Nikon, Canon cameras. Very few use Pentax, Fuji or anything else. So you can see how this has changed over the years, with Canon and Nikon dominating in the early years as DSLRs were more popular. Then with that switch, and you can see 2022, Sony becoming the more commonly used camera manufacturer. Another key trait that you really want to look for is sensor size. So 99% plus of nightscapes shortlisted in this competition are taken with full frame cameras. Basically, nobody is using APS-C crop sensor cameras or any other format. There's two main reasons for this. Full frame sensors perform better in low light, which is kind of inherent to night sky photography, and they enable you to capture the widest expanse of the night sky. So a crop sensor camera will literally crop in and narrow that. So It's probably the key thing you actually want to look for in a camera. And then we'll just touch on resolution. So most of these cameras have a resolution in the 20 to 30 megapixel range. I've always said this is kind of the sweet spot for nightscape photography. You don't really need bigger than that unless you're blowing them up and printing them off huge. Bigger file sizes can actually give you some headaches in terms of processing on your computer, in terms of storage of the files. The trend is slightly bucked here by that Sony A7R5 being the top camera, because that's got a 61 megapixel resolution. So maybe people are just getting more powerful laptops and finding better storage solutions. I'm not sure, but you can do amazingly well with a camera with 20 megapixels. One last thing to note about cameras is whether or not the cameras used were Astro-Modified is not reflected in the data. I don't have that. Some definitely are Astro-Modified. You can see this picture here from Tom Ray, and it's got those telltale pinks and reds coming through, which is an indicator of Astro-Modification. Plenty of others almost certainly weren't Astro-Modified. I don't have the data. I do have a separate analysis I did on the Milky Way Photographer of the Year competition. You can see that in a video here, or you can download from a link below. But now we're going to move from cameras to lenses. There's not too much data available on the specific models of lenses used, but there is plenty on the focal length used and the aperture used. From that, we can make a good guess about what the actual lenses used were. And we do have a little bit of data on the lens manufacturers. You can see Sigma top, Sony, Samyang and Rokinon. If we look at the focal lengths used for images, you can see the most popular here. Now obviously it depends on your composition as to what focal length you want to use. Some might not be doing it in one shot, some might be using a narrower focal length and stitching it together, but it's quite clear that 14mm is by some distance the most popular focal length. That gives you a really good wide angle for capturing a wide expanse of the night sky, and that makes sense. 24mm second, also pretty wide. Now we can look at aperture in a similar way. So the top there, f2.8, and then going down. So basically in a lens you want a fast aperture that's indicated by a low f number. This is the best indicator of how well the lens will perform in low light, because the faster it is, the better it is at gathering light, and that's kind of what you need. So f2.8 being above f1.8 and f1.4, probably because f2.8 lenses are cheaper, so they're more common, they're more likely to be used, but obviously you can still deliver with them as you're seeing in these results. If we take the little bit of information we have on the manufacturers, plus the focal lengths, plus the most common apertures used, we can make some pretty educated guesses on what the actual lenses used were. So some common ones we see used, the Rokinon / Samyang. They use different names in different markets, but they have a really good range of 14mm f2.8 lenses that are quite affordable. You have more premium Sigma 14mm faster aperture lenses. You have some really good Sony ones that pair specifically with some of those great cameras like the A7 III or the A7R5. You know that with landscape astrophotography you're going to be looking for a wide angle, fast aperture, compatible with your camera, and then you're probably going to take account of price. So again, if you want to download the data of all the cameras, everything used, you can find the link below. So moving from lenses to the last bit of landscape astro gear that we have data on is star trackers. You can see here the top models of star trackers used: Skywatcher Star Adventurer Pro Top, Ioptron Skyguider Pro. The top two, they're really well known, really well relied on, reasonably priced. The Move Shoot Move Nomad's kind of come through in the last few years and is really well respected. It's a bit lighter weight, it's a bit more affordable. If you have a DSLR or mirrorless camera and lenses and you're using them to take landscape astro images, if you have a star tracker you can actually take deep sky images as well. There's a link to a really good course below that talks you through that, called Deep Sky Mastery. Check it out. Unfortunately don't have any data on tripods used. Pretty much though, it's carbon fiber tripod good, aluminum tripod not so good, unless all you can afford and all you have is an aluminum tripod, in which case it's still pretty good anyway. So if you take all this together you could plan out some really good setups from budget upwards. So a good budget setup, looking at this, you could take a Canon EOS 60 used, a few $100, a Rokinon / Samyang 14mm lens, pretty affordable, a regular aluminum tripod, and you're good to go. You can definitely deliver a lot with those. A mid-range setup might look like a Sony a7 III, a Sony 14mm lens, perhaps a Move Shoot Move Nomad star tracker, and then either an aluminium or a carbon fiber tripod. And then a premium setup, you go a Sony a7R5, again a Sony 14mm lens, fast aperture lens, Skywatcher Star Adventurer star tracker, and a carbon fiber tripod. Obviously, if you've got the budget for all that, you're not going to be limited by your gear, put it that way. Remember, star trackers are optional. Camera, lens, tripod, not really. You're going to need each of them. So if you want all this data to take away, link below. I've been doing this analysis of the Astronomy Photographer of the Year competition for 8 years. I originally bought all the books and literally manually went through them all, writing it into a giant spreadsheet. Used to take me a good week to do it. Then actually the museum that won the competition reached out to me a few years back and said, we like what you're doing, but you don't need to do that anymore. We can give you the data in a spreadsheet, which is super kind of them. And it made me feel a bit stupid that I didn't just ask. The competition's awesome. If you're in London, you can go and see the exhibition. It's amazing. You can buy the books and calendars also. I'm going to make another video on the deep sky and planetary astrophotography data. Depending on when you watch this, may already be out. If it is, I'm going to link to it here. Or if not, you'll have to find it. But let me know if you have any questions about this, or if there's anything that you want me to dig into a bit more and pull out the data on, any specific item, then just let me know in the comments below. Peace.